Well, hello everyone, and welcome to CORTEX Razor's Edge Business Review, where we're going to have a discussion about some issues which strike us as interesting, and we hope you agree too, both from our kind of personal experience of businesses, supply chains, risk, and so on, and some things which are in the news that you may or may not be aware of. You'll definitely get a slightly different take on them, even if you are aware of them. So my name's Mills, and I'm an associate professor at Northampton Business School. But don't let that put you off. Hopefully I'll have something interesting to say, unlike many people in my kind of position. And I'm joined, of course, by the wonderful Liam Fassam, who's our supply chain mind.
Good afternoon, everyone. And you can see our Twitter handles at the bottom there if you want to get on with it, get in touch with us. And I think actually, rather than talk about ourselves like most academics are great at, I think it's probably best to talk about other and more interesting things, Mills.
Yeah, so this week, Liam, I thought I'd start by giving you a little bit of an insight into my exciting life, and same for our listeners as well. I had the great privilege and honour of representing the university at my very first sales and marketing event, which was promoting, in particular, our MBA top-up and some of our supply chain offerings to essentially the cream of the current and future military officer cadre of the UK and some of our partner nations at the Defence Academy.
Mm-hmm.
So I got hold of all my marketing collateral, as a poster is apparently called, and a few leaflets. Brought along my army flag, £1.50 off eBay. A couple of boxes of merchandise, collapsible water bottles, carabiners, almost sugar-free mints.
And
and so on.
Actually going to interrupt you there. I'm hoping you saved one of those collapsible water bottles, because I hear they were a bit of a storm on social media, so I'm looking for one myself.
Well, you can have many, because we do have a substantial supply of them. We anticipated massive demand, as any organisation well informed by supply chain experts would. So we're able to accommodate customer demand very easily.
Fabulous.
Or it may just have been an over-order, who knows?
Great. So you're using inventory to manage customer demand. Excellent. No risk in that. Moving on. So the point is...
So the point is, in this illustrious location of the Defence Academy, with officers whose most junior rank was major, are all looking to acquire civilian qualifications as they progress through the military and either look for promotion, hopefully we're going to become brigadiers and 3-stars and such like, and use us a lot in the future, or bounce out and move on to their second civilian career.
Cool. This would be the MBA you were talking about, yeah?
This would be the MBA top-up, and also your distance learning supply chain stuff.
Yeah.
So there's me with my stand, standing in front of my table, meeting and greeting people, and let's just be frank about it, jumping out and grabbing people and infusing them about the friendly, approachable, and also wildly cost-effective offering that we have at Northampton. And I'm surrounded by our competitors. So to my right, the Open University; to the left, King's College, Portsmouth around, Staffordshire, many universities. But the weird thing is, we're the only university, as far as I could tell, that actually sent teaching staff that the potential students would ever deal with. Everyone else is a marketing person or a salesperson, and their job seems to be, it looks a good job, not very effective, but it looks potentially quite a fun job, is to sit behind a table and to tap away on a laptop or text stuff on, and every so often go away and get off a big mug of coffee. And you, if you're lucky, have a student who hangs around long enough to speak to you. And it struck to me very odd, A, that you would hide away behind a desk and not engage with people, but B, that any university would send sales and marketing people and not the actual folk the student would deal with to engage with these people and close the deal, because there's loads of competition out there.
But isn't that back to some of our conversations about this disruptive innovation in education? Historically, an academic does actually hide in the office and only comes out when they're finished doing their publications, and relies on slide decks to keep themselves informed. I mean, how can that person go out and front the public?
Well, I suspect that's probably what's happened. But in the past, academics have been strong-armed into going out on the road to meet potential students, and they've been so awful at that task by I don't know, trying to persuade people to read their dreadful journal articles or something. But that's been so ineffective that the default position has been, well, at least we'll send out some reasonably attractive and chatty people who may not know a lot about the courses being offered and certainly won't be teaching on them, but they're not going to be offensive.
It strikes me because I know this event you're talking about. I was lucky enough to go last year, and it strikes me in these. And I'm not suggesting for a second that those organisations sat around you are mis-selling, but the differentiator I found last year was questions were able to be answered by potential clients immediately on what actually happens, so they get an actual real appreciation of what to expect when they turn up at the university. And I would struggle to see how, someone that's removed from that environment can answer confidently, anything about the curricula, the learning styles, the content, and walk them through it. So,
yeah, and I really think they struggle. Certainly, some of the students were. They were surprised. That I was, introducing myself by my first name and all that kind of thing. But B, that I was a member of the teaching staff, but that's because I looked so youthful. But they were saying about the other institutions that the marketing people, when they were asked a question about the course, any detail, they'd have to say, "I'll get back to you," which is always a hopeless response in today's world of retail and selling and marketing of anything. And secondly, if they're asked about the teaching style, the virtual learning environments, because most of these are distance learning or blended learning offerings, they're just reduced to something like, "Oh, it's excellent. We have the best people, the best technology, very supportive, and so on and so forth." Whereas if I'm there, if someone like you is there, Liam, people straight away can see that we're approachable and friendly and free-thinking, open to disruption, able to immediately reassure them about doing a dissertation is not the most tough challenge you'll ever face in life. You've probably already overcome worse things in your military career. And begin to reassure people that it's something you don't want to put off. Get on with it. And, we'll be cheerful people at the end of the phone, email, meet us in person, rather than being behind a sort of institutional wall and you're still left guessing. What actually will the experience be like? What will the people that I have to deal with be like?
But this is, it's sort of like quite a bizarre experience, but really this comes back to the and I know I sound like a broken record, everything comes back to the business, blah, blah, but in a business, if you ran a business like that in a siloed environment, you are never going to meet the customer demands. And this is a problem, I think, with not just the universities, but businesses, when they say, you know what, the marketing team does the marketing, the sales team does the selling, the finance people count the money, and the operations people move shit. And unless we have an appreciation of all these tasks and some sort of cross-functionality and say, you know what, in an operations function, it is my job to go out and sell. It is my job to have an appreciation of finance. And it's only when you have this collaborative thinking and risk sharing do I think, I know it's our favourite subject, resilience, but I think it's only then do you start to build resilient businesses. With this sort of sending marketing people along or just sending academics on their own along, that's wrong. It needs to be a more collaborative, cohesive approach, I believe.
Yeah, I think that's right. Marketeers no doubt have their strengths, and I don't really want to particularly diss them as a profession. We need them, but equally, there's not very many products and services out there where you buy from a person who doesn't, at least in some way, help deliver the product or service that you're going to receive in the end. Even if you're buying a service off a big consultancy, any of the big 4 or 5. We all know that the person doing the pitching and the person who comes along to the progress meetings and heads it up is not going to be the person doing the majority of...
No, yeah.
But I think the good news to take away from this really is that it's still incredibly easy to differentiate from competitors by doing something simple like being a friendly, relatively fun and approachable person, and an academic turning up at a fair where other people have just sent sales and marketing people, or that's it basically. So good news for us who are still doing some disruptive thinking.
Yeah, I like that. Or something different. break from the norm. So,
Exactly.
and I assume you had lots of interesting people. Just to close off on that one, you had with the differentiator.
Yeah, huge amounts of them, and
Cool.
with a lot of them, they'd otherwise be thinking about doing sort of named MBAs and things. And I was saying, well, you could go to another provider who's going to cost you more, and you'll be patronised and subject to having to write like a 1950s Oxford Don, and so on and so forth. And you're buying a pig in a poke. Why don't you specialise, become a specialist in the area you want to, for example, supply chain, logistics, security, resilience or something, by making that the theme of your dissertation, which is the main part of your top-up MBA with us. And that's like a cheeky approach. Seemed to work quite well.
Cool. Actually, funny, very good. I read an article yesterday in the FT on MBAs who basically said there is no differentiation between them now because they've all become so bloody expensive. The top 8 business schools now are sort of leaving everyone else behind, charging $100,000 over the life of an MBA, and people are now looking back and saying, well, actually, what value am I getting from this? If I want to go and start my own business up, am I honestly going to get the return on investment? Do they really have the innovation to take me through? It's maybe we talk about that next time, because it's a very interesting article, really interesting.
Yeah, no, I like the sound of it. I was certainly students coming up to me and sort of saying, why is Plymouth twice as expensive as you? I said, well, you'd have to ask them that, really. They said, well, they say we've got accreditation from such and such an international organisation. And I said, well, okay. I mean, I've never met anyone who's been in an interview and the person asks them, where's your MBA from? Oh, that's interesting. Is it accredited by such and such? And I said, well, the great thing about this accreditation is, basically a university pays £50,000 or dollars to an organisation and they get certified.
Yeah.
Whether you or I think that's worth it is up to us. But any MBA from any UK university is regulated and authorised by the UK government, Department for Education and so on. So they're all basically properly controlled and inspected and so on. If you want to pay a premium of double for membership of some basically unknown organisation who's further authenticated the MBA, that's okay. But if it was me, I wouldn't do it.
Yeah, and just I'm going to add a point on this because I'm quite passionate about this and get the soapbox out. But the difference between the Amber accredited MBA and a non-Amber accredited MBA is the institution with the Amber accreditation has ensured that every one of their academics has a PhD. The non-Amber accredited institution ensures that every one of their academics understands the bloody content of the stuff they're teaching, i.e. has industry experience. So actually the differentiator is not to... I shouldn't say that because it's wrong for me to say it, but it doesn't deliver the value it thinks it does. But anyway.
Moving on then.
Yeah, talking about soapboxes, Mills. Yes, your biggest soapbox. Coffee shops.
Well, yes. So, Liam, you and I both spend an awful lot of our lives in coffee shops, having great thoughts, meeting great people and closing deals.
Well, it's a stretch. I'm sorry. Myself and great thoughts in one sentence is a bit of a stretch, but thank you anyway.
I'm flattering you.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
And obviously, they're pretty much a mainstay of our cultural life in the UK these days. I still remember the days when if you wanted coffee, it was a spoonful of instant in a mug in a bakery or something. That was Cornwall in the 80s. Things have moved on a lot. Now a lot of business is conducted in coffee shops. A lot of us go there on our spare time, either working on our laptops, still in our spare time, or chilling out, or with family and friends and so on. They're great hubs of our community, and it means you don't always have to be in a pub drinking. So, the excitement in Northampton...
Do you not?
Sorry?
You said you don't need to be in a pub drinking. You don't then? You
don't? No, apparently not. I know it's all news to you.
Oh, okay, right. Thanks. Okay.
You're welcome. I know dry January was a great success for you.
Struggle. Anyway.
Yeah. So the great exciting news in Northampton recently was that a new branch of Starbucks opened. Previously, there's been a couple of franchises, a drive-through and one based in a cinema. Very nice locations as well.
Are there other coffee franchises available in Northampton?
Other coffee franchises are available.
Okay,
Cafe Nero, Costa, Cafe d'Italia, and many others. Yes.
Okay.
For the sake of balance. Very good. But Starbucks is, it's a premium brand, much loved by many people, but also equally hated by some. And I was really entertained when the announcement hit the local press of the new Starbucks is about to open in an otherwise fairly unremarkable corner of the Market Square. the local independent traders began to get a bit overexcited.
Mm-hmm.
And that's always a bit of a red rag to a bull for me. Social media, it's a broadcast tool, but it's also an interactive tool. So when a certain local cafe started begging, basically, local residents and people who operated other independent businesses to not patronise the Starbucks, but instead to stay loyal to or discover local businesses they hadn't been to before, I decided to get a bit interested in this. And so I looked into this particular coffee shop and bakery, and I discovered rather entertainingly that it opened from, I think it's 9 till 4, Wednesday to Friday, Wednesday to Saturday, and then half a day on the Sunday. So a couple of days a week it's shut, and it works, it's open on, kind of the middle of the day. Most people's working days begin before that and finish after that. And so they're trying to compete with Starbucks, but from a fundamentally uncompetitive position. And their position is, don't go there, go to a local shop. And also, by the way, the local shop isn't open very much. So make sure that you make a mental note or put in your mobile phone diary or something, that when you feel like going out for coffee and a chat with a friend or a date or something, that you don't make that appointment for a Monday or Tuesday or a Sunday afternoon. So I got involved in quite a heated Twitter exchange. The heat didn't come from me, by the way. Sort of saying, well, actually, you need to compete on the ground that Starbucks is in, which is being open long hours. About customer service. It's not just about price and so on and so forth. But I thought I would pluck up the courage to go and experiment, hopefully covertly, and see what this little independent shop was like. In the interests of balance, we know how important objectivity is in science, don't we?
Absolutely.
Incredibly important. So I trotted along there after doing the park run with my eldest daughter last Saturday, and first impressions, it's a residential street. The windows of this cafe stroke bakery are so coated in condensation that you can't actually see in. So, it looks a bit like a dodgy adult shop, really, because you can't see through the windows. So we took the risk and we went in, and the queue snakes around. So you're shuffling in through the door, and then you're making sure the door doesn't open and squash you or squash my eldest daughter. She's fairly robust. Even so, we don't want to be hit by a door. And then you have that unusual situation of the 10, 12-minute wait to get a cup of coffee.
Ah, yeah, that's good.
With a barista who's moving at, he's got one speed. Some of us only have one speed in our gearboxes, and he sticks to his one speed and doesn't make eye contact with the people in the queue who are about 60 centimetres away from him. Just gets on doing his thing, and then you eventually served by his accomplice, who says something like, "What can I get you?" as opposed to "Good morning, sorry about the wait," and so on. And then you get your coffee. I have to say the coffee was excellent, and they did a pretty remarkable pecan and maple syrup marshmallow of a very bizarre consistency, but extremely nice, and a phenomenal amount of sugar. That was great. But the overall experience, would I go back? I price my time, even and perhaps especially at weekends. And standing around for 10 minutes or more waiting for my coffee, with no one offering me a free macaroon to nibble on while I'm stood up in that queue. I don't think I'm going back. Would you go there, Mr. Fassen?
No, my tolerance levels, like at the best of times, I think you're a lot more tolerant than I am. I mean, I can't abide by poor service. And I think in this day and age, businesses that don't understand, the service, the auspices of good service with their customers, they don't, as far as I'm concerned, they don't deserve to exist. And I get really angry with this mentality of my business has been here. I'm not saying it with this one, but my business has been here for 15, 20 years. And this sort of NIMBYistic attitude of how dare someone else come along. I'm the only player. Well, I'll tell you what, there's room for loads of coffee shops in this. We are coffee magnets in this country. We're addicted to the goddamn stuff. You could fill a whole high street for the shops and they'll all be busy. But you've got to differentiate. You can't sit there wheedling. It's like the people that moan about Amazon and drones and robots and driverless cars. Look, it's coming.
Yeah.
Get with it. Get yourself a little bit of innovation and a bit of thinking, and realise that this is actually going to improve your life. And concentrate and spend your time doing something else. I don't know. There's a danger of me really getting on my soapbox here, but no, I wouldn't bloody well go back there because they don't deserve my money, to be quite frank.
I think you're right, yeah. Well, maybe surprisingly, I do agree with you completely. I think the interesting thing as well, when I was talking about this with my wife, was she said, well, that's all very well, but how long has this coffee and bakery been open? And the answer is a few months. And you then have to think, well, that's interesting, because by setting up, they will be taking trade away from other independent traders.
So they're not a long-established business then?
They're not long-established, no.
Okay, that's interesting.
But it's unlikely, I think, that they're going to attract trade away from people who already go to Costa or Cafe Nero or one of my favourites, the tiny little shop Cafe d'Italia. I think they're going to parasitise from nearby other independent cafes and Greasy Spoons, which are just around the corner, actually. So I'm not entirely sure, but that's fair, really. Just because you've got the money to set up a slightly hipsterish, and that's again one of my bugbears, hipsterish coffee and bakery outlet. What about the poor people around the corner who have been sweating, literally and metaphorically, making their Greasy Spoon pay off for 10 years or more, and now you're taking trade directly from them?
Well, it's a little bit hypocritical. Shouting and screaming at a big brand. I mean, people tend to shout and scream at big brands anyway because they're, as far as I'm concerned, easy targets.
Yeah.
I'm still stuck on the business model, to be fair. 4.5 day weeks. Well, it actually is 10 till 4 a business day. I'm not quite sure if it does. No. I know I'm sounding a bit Alan Sugar-esque there, but if you come into a business and operate from 10 to 4, 4.5 days a week, it just doesn't seem like you're being very serious about this. And you're right. Are you being fair to other people? Does it really matter in business? At the end of the day, if you can differentiate and attract customers in and keep customers coming back, you're the business that's going to win. The experience you had. Again, can I just ask, when the clearly process-driven barista did the coffees and whatever else you had there, did it all arrive at the same time?
No, we'd already concluded eating our lovely, rather flabby marshmallow by the time the coffees rocked up.
See, that's another big. I'm sorry, we're going to get into coffee shop service here, but you're paying big money.
Yeah.
For effectively, which is what is hot water and some grains. Actually, should we bringing the whole modern slavery thing into this? Stuff that was grown by some poor farmer in South America somewhere that got pittance for that. And then the margin up here, once you get to the coffee shop in Northamptonshire or in any other county, and it's sort of marginalised up at 600-700%. And then you've got to wait for it to turn up. That's, to me, that's a bugbear in itself. But I'm firmly in the Starbucks camp. I know there's other coffee shops available, but my figures. I frequent that place. I love it. The customer service is beyond belief. And yes, you might think I'm being sponsored by them now. I don't care. I was in there yesterday. The manager was cleaning the table and apologising profusely because there were stains on it. Yeah. He was cracking the whip and making sure that everyone was engaged in with customers. The place was clean. It was warm. It's got free internet, and it gave me everything I wanted. So why would I go elsewhere?
I agreed. Yeah, and I think this particular cafe was boasting its ethical credentials rather entertainingly, given what you've just said about profit margins. And indeed, their coffee is supplied from an allegedly fair trade supplier. But of course, I don't know what percentage of their profits they give to charities. And of course, companies like Costa and Starbucks do have charitable foundations which plough quite a lot of money back into local voluntary groups, but also to farmers and producers, helping them make the most of protecting the soils in, Rwanda or something, and so on and so forth. So sometimes, it could be an awful lot more ethical and responsible to the planet by buying from a huge global brand than from your local hipsters chancing it around the corner.
Yeah, and again, I'm overusing this word today. Maybe I think I'm playing Cynical Friday. I really am, because I'm getting a little bit fed up with businesses throwing the ethical thing at me. They should be doing that anyway. If you've got to tell me you're being ethical, then there's something bleeding wrong. It's like this modern slavery act. I read something rather amusing this morning, and it is rather amusing, and I'm sorry if I offend people, and well, maybe I'm not sorry, but the Vatican decided this morning that they're going to make sure that their slavery is eradicated from all their supply chains, which,
wow.
when I was drinking my morning cup of coffee reading this in a very reputable newspaper, I'm thinking, you're supposed to be the bastion of all things ethics and good to all men and women. And you're advertising that you're going to do this. I would have just assumed, now I know it's very dangerous to make assumptions, that they would have been bloody well having ethical supply chains anyway. But they've got the balls to advertise it. It's like these companies who say, we're going to look after the farmer, we're going to look after the supplier. Well, hold on a minute, you should have been doing that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the story we see this week with Tesco getting an absolute rollicking, and rightly so, about their buyer-supplier behaviours.
Yeah.
It's like, I'm sorry guys, this is not some kindness or USP. You should be doing this, whether you're a small coffee shop by a lake in a county somewhere, or you're a major multinational. So yeah, sorry, you've got me on my soapbox there, mate, but it's winds me up.
I think it's right. It's all these things are not bolt-ons or things that you greenwash or whitewash over the top. They should be, fundamental to how you run your business, and should have always been so.
Absolutely, they're not bloody nectar points. You don't collect nectar points and then say at the end of the month, okay, I'm feeling really good, I'll give the nectar points to the poor suppliers that you're screwing in South America. These are, you're right, it's not a value-add service. This should be ingrained in your business from day one. In your strategy of suppliers, you should be this ethical behaviour.
Yeah, no, agreed.
So anyway, I'll stop. It's Friday, it's getting late, I need a...
All right, well, let's move on to one of your topics then. Now we've dealt with all of my personal bugbears and concerns.
Well, this isn't a bugbear; it's more of a concern, to be fair. I mean, that again, something I read on the plane yesterday. The headline says Europe's ports vulnerable, ships sails without oversight, and I mean, effectively, what we're saying, if I can find it, there's a nice little visual there going on. Is they got an example of a ship that left Libya, went to Tunisia, left the port in Tunisia and sort of lingered off the coast, turned all its tracking stuff off for 3.5 hours, turned it back on, meandered up the coast of Tunisia, then into Italy. And this is quite a regular thing, I'm led to believe. And some of the digging I did yesterday, figures mentioned of 60% of vessels make a stop en route that's not connected to their cargo. Now, I think I mentioned to you before, this might be, you might stop off let the crew have a bit of a break or something, although if you're operating a shipping line, every day not moving is costing you money. So you're not really going to do that too often. So yeah, my point is, we spend a lot of time and effort on risk and resilience in supply chains and coming up with technologies and processes to make sure that we're safe and our products are safe and employees and all that sort of good stuff. We spend a shed load of money in aviation. Everyone focuses on that as being the evil, that's the nastiness. Yet we allow ships to... It's almost sort of in the era of Pirates of the Caribbean and Admiral Nelson. These things are just floating around, doing what they will, coming into port without check. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
Well, it does really seem quite concerning. Yeah, I mean we're completely dependent on the flow of goods across the globe in containers. Or is it MTUs that you call them in your world?
It could be anything. Different name. TEUs.
Oh, TEUs, okay, yeah. So dependent on the flow of TEUs across the planet, very, very important. But in our mind's eye, or certainly in mine, you have the idea that some enormous vessel sets off from Shanghai or some massive port, and then takes the most efficient route possible to get to Europe, and then it offloads its containers in Rotterdam or Felixstowe or something, and then it's put on trucks off to a distribution centre, ends up in Amazon, and then it comes cascading through my front door in a unstopping stream. But the reality seems to be quite different. That there is all that stuff, but in parallel, there's all sorts of things shuffling around with loads, but they're not taking the most direct and efficient route between A and B. They're sort of bizarrely heading off into the Atlantic for a little bit and then coming back. And some of the visualizations on that site you've pointed me to are quite stark for that. Why would a ship just exit the Mediterranean, head out into the Atlantic for a bit, and then come back? Unless there's been a sudden change and they're no longer They no longer need to stop off in Ireland or Iceland or New York or something. So they go back to Italy. It all seems very mysterious, and I guess the key thing is it's all ungoverned space, because a lot of this is in international waters. The ship's ownership structures are probably incredibly complex.
Mm-hmm.
Tracking is only done for navigational purposes in and around ports and off coastlines. If the company subscribes to some sort of international rescue type service, I suppose that they're constantly tracked. And some of them we can all watch on Vessel Finder and other things. But there does seem to be complete freedom for them to go and stop wherever they want.
Yeah, I mean, the one you're talking about there, I've just moved the visual down. I mean, this ship went 350 miles out into the Atlantic, and then did a U-turn to go back into it beggars belief. I mean, but the more concerning stat, there it is. 17 ships reported to have used false identities. These ships are arriving in commercial ports with a false identity. Now, I'm not an aviation expert, but I would dare suggest if you tried to land an aircraft at Heathrow with a false identity, there are mechanisms in place
to make sure you didn't land there and landed somewhere a bit quieter.
Yeah, or you wouldn't even get to landmass. Well, I'm going with that one. So how come we can have something the size of, these things are big. I mean, there's a great piece of research done with that's a great as in good research, not great as in what the research is about. The Homeland Security in the US are very concerned about the next problem being a dirty bomb. You stick a dirty bomb inside one of these containers and rocket up into one of the West Coast or East Coast ports. It's going to cause chaos. Not only loss of life, but in terms of revenue. Billions and billions and billions of dollars lost because you shut down the infrastructure. You cause untold problems with stock that's already in movement. And I can't remember the stats from this report, but it was massive. It was eye-watering figures that were purported just from this dirty bomb. And now this dirty bomb's not going to take out New York. It's not that, but it's designed to knock out infrastructure. And if you've got ships that are stopping off here, there, and everywhere else, it becomes a real bloody stark reality. I hate to be scaremongering, but it's a genuine risk.
I think that's a very useful scenario to think around. A dirty bomb. The sort of Hollywood approach would be, vast amounts of explosive, vast amounts of highly radioactive or irradiated material, all going up together and causing a lot of death and mayhem. The reality is you could cause paralysis for a very long time to the centre of many cities which have big rivers, big navigable rivers running up them, or ports nearby, by a shipping container with some old X-ray radioactive sources and a few other things, some low-grade radioactive waste of a reactor somewhere over in the world. You blow all that lot up. It's not going to kill anybody.
No.
But you've got contamination all around, which is going to have to be dealt with. And there's no precedent, really, for dealing with cleaning up low to mid-level radioactive contamination of a major city. You certainly can't have people hanging around for stuff. You've got to move them away and deal with it. And there's not a great deal of technical capacity around in the private or public sector to deal with that anywhere on the planet. So, all these people who always think that terrorism is going to involve, terrorists building an actual nuclear bomb to set off in the middle of a city, well, that's very complex and difficult for all sorts of reasons. Not least because you attract attention by trying to buy all your stuff off eBay. But that kind of scenario is so much more likely, so much cheaper, and given the erratic behaviour of some of these vessels, you wouldn't really have much warning, because by the looks of it, vessels are all the time doing pretty strange things on their routes.
And it becomes even more concerning if you make a very good point about parking it in the middle of a city, but if we just consider for a second the global trade that we all rely on, every country relies on this. 7% of the world's goods, everything that gets bought or sold, travels through Rotterdam, and 14% of world trade travels through Hong Kong. So between those two ports, two very, in the greater scheme of things and life, two small sections of infrastructure almost account for 25% of the world's goods being moved at any one time. Now, if you did you imagine the effect that would have just one attack on that, let alone a coordinated attack, and you could bring the world's freight to its knees for a week, it would have a devastating effect. So I'm really surprised that we, and I've been around logistics for a long time now, and the shipping industry kind of just works. No one's ever questioned it, and I'm actually sitting here this morning and last night thinking, you know what, this needs to change. Something needs to change here.
Yeah, quite a thorny problem, but not exactly insoluble. And I remember when we were kind of exchanging ideas last night about what we'd speak about today, I was kind of saying, well, a great big metal thing floating about ocean is not the most difficult thing to track.
No.
And maybe a port, whether it's Dubai, Port World, or Shanghai, or Felixstowe, or Rotterdam, or somewhere else, maybe they might want to have a kind of a risk assessment profiling thing to have a look at what that ship has been up to and think, do we really want to let that within X number of miles of our port, or do we in fact want to have a word with the Coast Guard and others and work out, really, do we want it entering our territorial waters?
Well, that begs another good question. I mean, the US have 100% cargo scanning now, and I'm wondering how well connected that is to companies that are floating around the middle of the Atlantic and disappearing off radar for 3.5 hours at a time. It just seems to me the whole thing, you scan the cargo that goes on the ship, but you're not particularly bothered about the vessel that it's going on. So it's
okay, yeah.
It was a little bit like the air freight times of we scan all the passengers. We all go through that lovely convenience of taking laptops out of the bags and whatever security process is in place this week. But until very, very, very recently, it didn't matter about the cargo going in the hold because you were a secure cargo handler, which meant you had a certificate. Certificate of compliance, which and the cargo went in the aircraft. So it's a similar situation. Obviously, things have changed now and things are scanned, but it smacks of the same thing with the shipping industry on a far larger scale.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, it seems to me as though we've got we're operating a very high trust regime when actually we can't afford to have high trust. And we need to be challenging the ship's operators as to why exactly it is that they've done taken the routes they have, which seem to be irrational and economically a bit stupid, and then do something about it. Let's hope that's done before these loopholes are exploited. It's one thing if stuff is moving illicitly across the Middle East, which is and North Africa, which is very alarming and will no doubt cause us some security headaches. But the slightly positive takeaway is at least that's a slight distance away. But if we do have these containers rocking up in our ports, or ships offloading stuff in various of our smaller ports as well as the big ones, and we don't really know the route they've taken and why they've taken it and what else they're transshipping at the same time, we need to know that ASAP.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think to sort of wrap that up, I think there's a great quote here from Callum Jeffrey, a research fellow at the Defence think tank, who basically said, and it's the same for every business, isn't it? I think we're building a bit of a theme here now. Maybe people should start listening. He says, what's needed is better upstream intelligence. That's it. He's saying we focus a bit too much on cause. So he's sort of alluding to the fact that we're looking at drugs and drugs only. And I sort of argue with this. I was doing a piece earlier for students where we seem to focus on one particular type of risk, and then all the other risks are sort of behind us still happening. And then we turn around and we notice all these other risks, and we continually firefighting risks instead of taking this holistic, intelligence-led approach to all risk, regardless of what it is, and saying, look, I'm going to manage, I'm going to mitigate against all risk. I'm not just going to focus on one, because then you become blinkered. I don't know if I'm making sense, but we seem to just focus on the moment. I mean, I sort of talked about planes earlier on. Whenever something happens in the aviation industry, we become really focused on that for some reason. So.
Yeah, completely. I mean, the whole risk industry and those charged with looking at risk and the business continuity and security side in the businesses and in the public sector are very reactive. And they're reactive either to real-world events or some trend which a professional body or someone else, some influential opinion former has decided is a thing we all need to be bothered about. So, back in the day, Y2K was a huge challenge, and rightly so, but was dealt with through an awful lot of expenditure and testing and the rest of it. Y2K-like challenges haven't gone away, but they're deeply unsexy and unfashionable and often very difficult to understand, so no one bothers looking at them. Then 9/11, people were then suddenly worried about attacks on tall buildings and iconic structures with an aircraft. So you adjust all your plans, which are all about specific scenarios, to that. And then the next thing happens, and then the next thing. Then it's, Paris-like attacks and how we're going to cope with that. Whereas really, you're quite right, it's all about all sources and it's about consequences. And companies' risk assessment should be dynamic and organic and challenging. And doing a lot more of a red teaming thing. If I wanted to achieve X consequence on my company, for example, what would be the ways of doing it and how would we handle it? As we are never going to know precisely how the threat might occur, might unfold, let's make sure we've got the sensors in place, the processes to respond and work quickly, effectively, access to the technical expertise we need and the money we need to spend to handle whatever fate, adversaries, accidents, fire, flood, pestilence throws at us. We've had planning for SARS in the past, and then the impact of foot and mouth on the food supply chain, and now we've got this Zika virus in Brazil. Yeah. Well, it's all about the consequences that are going to, echo up and down the supply chains. It doesn't matter whether it's Ebola or anthrax or Zika or chikungunya or something else. It's about the effect.
Yeah, absolutely. And it strikes me that every time one of these happens, we focus so much on it, we end up almost duplicating effort. And you think, well, what are you doing? Surely it's the same or similar reaction to these things.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Anyway, so that was my end of the week bugbear over a beer on the flight last night, thinking that just in disbelief. So I could sit and talk about this for hours, but I won't.
Awesome, and that kind of wraps us up for this week, doesn't it, Liam?
Yeah,
so
it does.
Thanks to all our wonderful listeners. Do tweet us or email us. You can track that down quite easily with any topics you'd like us to look at or any reactions to what we've said, and we look forward to catching up with you next week.
Yeah, and I actually think, just to finish up that, I think our colleague Purya is going to be doing either next week or the week after the live interview from Iran on risk to business. And that should be quite an interesting one. Well, yeah, as Iran now opens up, and there's all sorts of political and other issues around that, but the regime are busy signing, or have been busy signing contracts for 120 plus Airbus planes. They're buying more from Boeing. What else is going? British Airways is about to start 5 flights a week, I think, and then they're going to make it every day of the week from June or July. So, big changes afoot. Peugeot are going to build a manufacturing facility there, they announced this week. So okay, yeah. So, he's going to be in the right place at the right time. And let's pull together some questions to ask him live on the ground. Cool. Right. Thank you very much.